Hey, Frog Prince Rana here, and thank you for dropping by. First, I would like to point out the very obvious point regarding science. It relies on testable empirical evidence and observation, and changing your mind based on new evidence is a badge of honor in the scientific community. This is not flip-flopping, it is simply what the process is. If you have been a regular viewer of my channel, you might know my stance on pseudoscience and religion. Even with my affiliation to science, if there is a proof of a God, one who created us and judges us, I would agree with it, though would probably not agree with the great being. Which brings us to today's video. Now, I'm not prolific at all in Twitter space. I do have a handle at Rana Hussain UK, but not something I promote. I do post my video links and once in a while reply to notifications popping up. Most of the replies to either pro-Brexit people or virus deniers. At one of the replies, I was solidly put in my place regarding face mask and children by a Rebecca Sue Smith with a simple reply of "Real science please" and a link to a publication. The publication is titled Experimental Assessment of Carbon Dioxide Content in Inhaled Air with or Without Face Masks in Healthy Children, a randomized clinical trial, published at June 30th, 2021. It is honestly a very convincing document, at least at a face value. So I will first cover what this document claims, and spoiler, I'm not convinced. So after reading the document, we will look at the methods and point out all the possible problems and mistakes. Finally, to top it off, I will talk about the primary author of this document and biases. With that being said, let's jump into it. Following is from the document. Many governments have made nose and mouth covering or face mask compulsory for school children. The evidence base for this is weak. The question whether nose and mouth covering increases carbon dioxide in inhaled air is crucial. In large-scale survey in Germany of adverse effects in parents and children, using data of 25,930 children, has shown that 68% of the participating children had problems when wearing nose and mouth covering. The normal content of carbon dioxide in the open is about 0.04%, i.e. 400 particles per million. A level of 0.2% by volume, or 2000 ppm, is the limit for closed room, according to the German Federal Environmental Office, and everything beyond this level is unacceptable. Now, that is quite a bold and important claim. Let's look at the method now. We measured carbon dioxide content in inhaled air with or without two types of nose and mouth covering in a well-controlled, counterbalanced, short-term experimental study in volunteer children in good health. A 9-minute measurement for each type of mask was allowed. 3 minutes for measuring the carbon dioxide content in joint inhaled and exhaled air, 3 minutes for measuring the carbon dioxide content during inhalation, and 3 minutes for measuring the carbon dioxide content during exhalation. The carbon dioxide content of ambient air was always kept well under 0.1% by volume through multiple ventilations. The sequence of masks was randomized, and randomization was blinded and stratified by age of children. We analyzed data using a linear model for repeated measurement with p less than 0.05 as the significant threshold. The mean age of the children was 10.7 years, range 6 to 17 years, and there were 20 girls and 25 boys. For result, only age was associated with carbon dioxide content in inhaled air. Hence, we added age as a continuous covariant to the model. Construct showed that this is attributable to the difference between the baseline value and the value of both masks jointly. Contrasts between the two types of masks were not significant. We measured means between 13,120 and 13,910 ppm of carbon dioxide in inhaled air under surgical and filtering face piece FFP2 mask, which is higher than what is already deemed unacceptable by the German Federal Environment Office by a factor of 6. This was a value reached after 3 minutes of measurements. Children under normal conditions in school wear such masks for a mean of 270 minutes. The figure shows that the value of the child with the lowest carbon dioxide level was threefold greater than the limit of 0.2% by volume. The youngest children had the highest values, with one 7-year-old child's carbon dioxide level measured at 25,000 ppm. So that is an overview of the document. It is important at this point to look at the PDF documents, including details on the methods used. The measurements were taken by an automated device, G100 CO2 incubator analyzer, with measurement range of 0 to 20 volume percent accuracy, plus minus 1% of measurement range after calibration, and dual wavelength infrared measurement every second, through a measurement tube fixed to the face of the child, between lips and nose, about 1.5 cm distance from the nostril. Each child was provided with a fresh set of masks. Masks of various producers were used: KN95 respirator, particle filtering half mask, MNS surgical mask, 3-layer type 2 and one-way mask. Now, G100 with accuracy of 1% equals to 2000 ppm. With time response of 20 seconds, further explaining, T90 equal to 20 seconds, i.e., the instrument takes 20 seconds to reach 90% of a stable reading. A normal respiration cycle has a duration of 3 to 4 seconds. Thus, it is impossible to separate the concentration of CO2 in inhaled and exhaled air using this device. The study claims to have measured CO2 in inhaled air, but the author provides no basis for distinguishing between inhaled and exhaled air using the G100 at 1.5 cm from nose and face. The accuracy and testing method is also the reason why the measurement of average concentration is around 0.268% or 2680 ppm. That was much higher than the ambient value of 0.074% or 740 ppm, even when no mask is present. The document mentions that most of the complaints reported by children can be understood as consequences of elevated carbon dioxide levels in inhaled air. This is because of the dead space volume of the mask, which collects exhaled carbon dioxide quickly after a short time. This carbon dioxide mixes with fresh air and elevates the carbon dioxide content of inhaled air under the mask, and this was more pronounced in the study for younger children. But they did not address the amount of dead space within the mask that could be further making their measurements inconsistent or unreliable. As the authors used carbon dioxide levels inside the mask as a proxy for CO2 levels inhaled by a child, which is in reality a measurement of dead space CO2. Just as a snorkel user breathes in a small amount of dead space air from within the snorkel, but most air comes from outside it. Similarly, most of the air entering the child's lung will be inhaled from the ambient air outside the mask. Eve Bloomgarden, MD from Northwestern University Chicago, rightly points out, the relevant data would be the comparison between the dead volume and the lung capacity and/or the volume of one respiration cycle. The lungs never collapse completely during respiration. Together with the rest of the respiratory airways, the respiratory system also a dead volume that is much larger than the dead volume between the mask and the face. The comparison of this volume is of extreme importance for the discussion and may change the author's conclusion. Professor W. Meyer Augustine from Robert Gordon University, Aberdeen explains the measurement. The value of 3.846 and 3.847% carbon dioxide measured behind mask might actually represent CO2 endogenously produced as a result of the human body's metabolism. In adults, body weight adjusted endogenous CO2 production at rest is about 1.4 mmol per liter, which equates to a carbon dioxide content of 5.03% in exhaled air. The aforementioned values taken from the table of this article are entirely consistent with what one would expect in breath exhaled by children into an enclosed yet not leak-tight space. Chances are that measurement of exhaled breath in a space formed by a hand cupped toward the mouth and nose will have yielded values similar to those between mask and mouth and nose. Furthermore, to compare values of endogenous CO2 in exhaled breath as a result of the body's energy expenditure at rest with threshold values for CO2 in enclosed space appears ill thought out. It's like comparing threshold concentration for nitrogen oxide in ambient air with nitrogen oxide values measured directly at the exhaust of a car. To be honest, this research paper is completely flawed when one analyzes the PDF and figures. But for Facebook mums and dumb Twitter users, looking at you, Rebecca, the title is enough. Finally, we have real-life evidence from millions of children who have been successfully wearing masks every day for months. We have extensive evidence that masking is an essential protective strategy to slow and prevent the transmission of SARS-CoV-2. If this study were accurate and reflective of the real world, we would see adverse health events reported worldwide. But we do not see such report. We also have data from other peer-reviewed papers that has shown no harmful effects. Now let's look at the primary author of this document. But before that, there is something I need to clarify. I personally don't think there is anything wrong having a bias. Take yours truly as an example. When I debunk a flat earth theory, I start with the assumption that it is wrong in some way and then get to figuring out where the error is. But at the same time, it is possible to have a bias and then to change one's position based on newer data. That being said, many times we have people with a very specific agenda to poison the well with misinformation and bad research. Primary author of this paper, Walsh, has advocated for revision of the concept of evidence-based medicine, promoting holistic and homeopathic alternative in his publications. Starting in 2002, along with theoretical physicist Hartman Romer and Harold Atmanspacer, Walsh developed a model of weak quantum theory or generalized entanglement that attempted to explain anomalous phenomena such as a non-specific therapy effects and parapsychological phenomena. In 2012, Walsh received the negative prize Goldenest Brett from Australian Skeptics, an annual award for the most astonishing pseudoscientific notions of the year. The prize was awarded primarily for a master's thesis about the Kozyrev mirror conducted under his supervision, which was widely regarded as unscientific. He is on the scientific advisory board of a blog called Cam Media Watch, which is ran by the homeopathic company Heal. The blog describes itself as a spin doctor for promoting contemporary and alternative medicine, CAM. In 2012, it was reported that the blog had been paid to smear Edzard Ernest, a scientist critical of homeopathy. In 2021, a research paper co-authored by Walsh falsely claimed that 2 people died from COVID-19 vaccines for every 3 cases the vaccines prevented. Within a week the journal was published, it retracted it due to errors, misrepresentation of data, and incorrect conclusion. So we have bad measurement, invalid conclusion from a known snake oil salesman peddling misinformation. It is surprisingly accurate in the sense that snake oil salesman is a common expression used to describe someone who sells, promotes, or is a general proponent of some valueless or fraudulent cure, remedy, or solution. So please get vaccinated and wear mask in crowd while the virus is still at large. Not all hero wears cape, and you only need to be a part of herd immunity to be a hero yourself. That will be all for this video. If you found it useful, please do like, comment, and maybe even share it around. If you want to be super awesome, please consider subscribing to keep up with my new contents. Thank you so much for watching. Wherever you are, have a safe day. Signing off.
We are one people.